What do we do when we're hurt by people? What do we do when we're triggered by something in the world or by something that happens to us or out there? This is a big question, and it's something that a lot of us struggle with, including myself at times. And I want to share with you 3 insights and 3 practices of what to do once you're feeling triggered or hurt or upset by something or someone out there. Okay? So first thing is, it's okay. Like, it's all right when we're hurt or we're upset or we're in pain. A lot of times we will add something to the upset or to the hurt and make it worse than it could be. That could be a story that we add to it, like, this always happens to me, or why does this happen to me? Or why would they do this to me? You know, a lot of these like charged questions that we start to create a story around, a narrative around, and the narrative that we have in our lives in so many ways creates the experience that we have in our life. So I'll share a mundane example from myself. I would sometimes get frustrated by traffic, by parking. I give this example a lot. I know it's kind of mundane. I'll think of some richer ones, but it's something that happens to me regularly, right? I used to get like kind of frustrated and have this kind of panic is definitely too strong, but a mild panic around getting parking. Right now I live in Naples, Florida, and beach parking is difficult to get sometimes, right? So I mean, though this is such a first world problem, oh God, I've experienced really hard things. And if you listen to other videos, I actually have had significant problems in my life before, so I'm just using this one because it's top of mind. And it's something where I would have this narrative that like there's not enough parking, there's not enough for me, like why does this happen to me, is something I used to actually say to myself a lot. And I just shifted it and I just started saying to myself, I always get the best parking spot. And then as I lived and believed in that and fed that belief within myself, it absolutely happened. And I was able to find some kind of gem even when I didn't get the parking that I wanted. So again, if you're really struggling in your life, forgive me for offering this very bland, mundane, very first order problem with you. And we're going to apply the principles to things that really matter in our lives, okay? So first thing is just be aware of the narrative that we have around the pain, especially when, you know, we're in relationships and it's like, why does this always happen to me? Why does this guy always treat me this way? Why does this girl always do this to me? Why does this person never treat me the way I actually want to be treated and deserve, that I know I deserve to be treated? These are big questions. And there's probably some belief that you have inside of yourself that creates those circumstances. I had this when I used to date and I was in romantic relationships. I'm a celibate monk now. And what would happen for me is I would have this relationship that started in like so much awesome intensity and love and connection and intimacy and all these different, like, it was just amazing. And it would like quickly start to fizzle. There were a number of things that were happening for me. One, I realized that I was a selfish, entitled person and I wasn't willing to make sacrifices in those relationships. That was a sobering realization to have for myself and not what I expected, because I thought it was all about the other person for many years of my life. That was one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is that I wasn't meant to be, for me. This is not true for anybody out there, probably, if you're watching this, unless you're already a monk or a nun. But I realized that for me, after so many failed relationships, well, they weren't failures, relationships that didn't work out in the end, that we broke up or we ended at a point, I finally realized that the relationship path wasn't for me. The romantic path wasn't for me, right? Now, again, this isn't for you. Most likely you will heal, you'll evolve, and you're going to find an amazing, wonderful partner as long as you continue on a path of growth and evolution and seek out resources to evolve within yourself. So all this to say that there was a reason for me around why that particular aspect of my life wasn't working out. And I had to do a certain degree of evolution inside of me to realize what the answer was around why this thing out there wasn't working. I did an immense amount of inner work on myself and transformation and received loads of support from my community and my teacher, my spiritual master, and friends. I mean, everyone in my life essentially contributed something to me that I used to evolve and realize that this is the path that I really wanted as a celibate monk. And I'm so freaking happy, right? So you can have the same thing without being a monk. I assure you, because I've done it and I know plenty of other people that have done it without becoming a monk as well, right? Okay, so that's the first thing, is really look within and look at what narrative you have going on around the thing or the aspect of your life. Number two, I'm going to actually do a bonus one at the end of this too, I just realized. It's a great opportunity if you're being hurt or triggered in your life to create better boundaries for yourself, especially if you expose yourself to the same kind of relationship that creates the same result, which may be you getting hurt, you feeling disempowered, you feeling like you're not actually being loved, or it's more difficult to love yourself in the relationship than it is when you're alone, perhaps. There are so many different reasons around why having more clear boundaries in your life can be such a healthy thing. In fact, practicing saying no to things, right? If you tend to say yes to a lot of things, like I have that kind of a personality that tends to be more of like a pleaser kind of personality, it's very important for me. It was very important to me, and it still is very important for me to say no to things very clearly. And not to like put any doilies or, decorations around the nose. Like, oh no, I'm sorry after that. Just like, no, thank you. Not even maybe a thank you. Just like, no. Right. One micro practice that I started a couple of years ago that I'll still do. And this again comes from my roots of being grown up in Wisconsin, where everyone's super nice to each other. And there's a lot of like pleaser personalities in that state, I think. And I'm an example of that. At the grocery store, people will say, have a nice day. And instead of saying, thank you, you too, I'll just say, thank you. I'll just walk away. It's great. I just receive their sincere tiding, their blessing, whether they meant it or not. And I'll just take it and enjoy it, right? And then sometimes I'll give it, right? So that's a little micro practice around boundaries. It has to do with receiving, saying no, and saying yes, right? So we don't give away our responsibility. We're more discerning. We say yes to things we mean to say yes to, and no to things we mean to say no to. And in that way, we become more solid, more put together, more resilient, and actually more confident. Okay, that was number two. Number three, remind ourselves to put ourselves first in relationship. Now, at first glance, this could sound selfish. And in some ways, it could be, right? Especially if you have a commitment to your children or to a spouse and you always do something for yourself first. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about inside of commitments that you've made where you do things for other people, whether that's your job or a relationship with a spouse or a partner or your kids or your parents, whatever it may be. If you're taking care of elderly parents, for example, it's inside of those commitments, you honor the commitments and then you prioritize yourself. So, for example, you might go to your spouse and you might say, this weekend, I'm not going to see you. I love you and I know we've been planning this for a while and I'm going to take this weekend for myself. Now they get to, once you're clear with your expectations that they could have, you're clear about your communication around what you're doing and again, I think the best spirit of this is to be clear and honor any commitments that you've made or deal with them. Then take time for yourself. Maybe it's an hour a day. In fact, I know someone who is raising a child, who's educating their child, and they were very young, they're around 6 years old, and the mother said, when the clock is at this place, and they put a little ribbon on it, you can't bother me. My door will be shut, and unless it's an emergency, you cannot come in. And, it took a few times for the mother to remind the child when that happened, but that was her time to meditate every day. I think it was like from 4 to 6 a.m., something wild like that, right? But it worked. And the child benefited from that because it started learning he, she, them started learning boundaries. And the mother got to have her time by herself in her meditation, in her life that she had during that time in her life, right? So put your relationship with yourself first. Now that can happen also just in the moment as you're walking through your life, right? As opposed to being overly accommodating, or we could say even on the other side of that, overly pushy and overly arrogant or overly aggressive. I wouldn't say that's putting yourself first. I would say that's being aggressive, right? But find the sweet spot of how to put yourself first in your life and in your relationships. Again, in the right kind of relational way where you're kind and you're connected, but gosh, prioritizing yourself and speaking up for yourself, please, it's so powerful. It goes back to the old allegory in airplanes where they say to put your oxygen mask on first before helping the oxygen mask of others. We need to be able to take care of ourselves first in some ways. And that might actually look like sacrificing, quote unquote, some of our own time to get to that point and establishing that precedent. But practice that. That's, for me, how my cup gets filled so that I can give so much to others. And I, spend hours and hours talking to people who need my support every week, right? It's because I carve out that time, and certain times I am absolutely unavailable. Yeah? Okay, good. So 1, we've got look at the narrative. 2, create good, strong, robust boundaries. 3, a reminder to put ourselves in our relationships first, putting ourselves first. And with ourselves in our lives, yeah. And then number 4, a reminder that we alone are responsible for our own well-being. All right, so this is a big one, and it's maybe the most important one. When we blame others for the way that we feel, we give them the reins of our lives. We give them the reins of our livelihood even, and we give them the reins, most importantly, of our emotional, spiritual, and mental well-being. It's so easy when we're hurt or when we're triggered to make it about something else or someone else, as opposed to being open to maybe not knowing why this happened to me or why this person came into my life or why they treated me the way that they did, but to really look at how am I responsible for how I respond to this, right? I mean, can we control like whether we get in a car crash, or can we control whether how a person treats us in the world? I don't think so. I don't think that I do not have mastery over what happens to me per se. I would say I have some degree of an ability to create that. And how I live my life is that I am always 100% responsible for how I respond, feel, act in regards to what happens to me. Now, there's a layer to this where we are the creators of our reality, and we really dive deep into this area of focus, and you start looking into this and hearing what certain great leaders and spiritual leaders have said about this. You will find at the end point that you have created every single thing that happens to you in your life. Now, that's a big leap to make, and I'm not going to go into that now, but it is something to just plant a seed around, that is a way of living your life that is deeply satisfying. Let's take a step back and just look at how we can be emotionally responsible. In fact, this has happened to me. I like driving quickly, let's say, and sometimes that's very upsetting for people. I drive safely. I'd say I practice driving safely, but I also drive quickly. I have made some people, that's not quite true. Some people have gotten very upset with me at times. Actually, when I've been driving just fine, like one guy flipped me the finger, I remember a couple of years ago, and I was like, I don't even know what happened. One time I stopped at a stoplight, and I was a little fast going into it, and I kind of stopped because I wanted to make sure I was before the crosswalk. And a guy, this was in Denver, a guy was walking across the street, just stared me down and just gave me the finger right to my face. And I was just like, wow, okay. And I looked at him. And I kind of just let him go by because it looked like he wanted to fight me actually. And I was just standing there kind of straight face, not with this smile that I have right now, because that probably would have aggravated him. And he just kept walking by, and I was driving away, and there was a part of me that was angry, a part of me that was sad and regretful. And then there was the third part of me that I was like, why was he doing that? Oh, the fourth part of me was like, what did I do? Right? But there's a lot, when intense things like that happen to us, and this kind of thing happens in your families, in your relationships, we always have a choice. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but we can get access to always having a choice about how we respond to even the most painful circumstances. Right? So this is a choice that we make inside of ourselves. And this goes back to spending time with ourselves on our own If we can spend time on ourselves, with ourselves, every day, and this goes back to, there's a video I made that's 5 minutes will change your life, and spending 5 minutes a day in silence and stillness. When those kinds of things happen, it creates when we have spent time with ourselves in stillness and silence, it gives ourselves a space in the intensity of those kinds of moments where we create a choice around how we wish to respond. And for me, the greatest access to that is going into my heart, because I could just see things more clearly. I eventually was able to have compassion for that person. I was able to give myself the space to feel angry about it for a minute. I was also able to give myself the space of feeling regretful about it, that I probably should have driven more responsibly. And at the end, here's this saying that we use in some of the programs that we lead: I free you from me, and I free me from you. Meaning, you are you, I am me, and we're different. We can say this to people, not verbally per se, but within ourselves. Let people be free. Like this guy, I don't know, this guy was probably in incredible amounts of pain in his life, right? To just like a stranger in a car that he's never seen before, to flip me the bird, stare me down, and probably, like, I would have aggravated him. He would have ran over to my car, and I could have jumped out of my car, and we could have started brawling on the streets of Denver. I think it was like in the morning, at like 8 a.m. I mean, this guy was upset, right? So I was able to, in that moment, because of some practice, with a little bit of time, able to look at all these different experiences I was having inside, and at the end of the day, realize that he was free to be him, and I was free to be me, right? And everyone gets to make choices. And I was choosing to make this choice around being reflective about what happened, seeing what kind of responsibility I could take, and in the end of the day, he's going to do what he's going to do, right? And I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm going to be the person that I'm going to be. So here's the reminder in here. Let's bring this all together. When you're hurt or when you're triggered, it really is an opportunity. And it doesn't feel that way in the moment. But once you start to extract yourself out of the world of reactivity in your life, and you start to give yourself a little space, a little compassion, some self-love, oh my gosh, everything starts to open up. And your own growth and evolution as a person just gets more and more accelerated. Okay? All my best to you. I care for you so much. All my best. All my best.